You know, we do a better job of dealing with the past than we do the future as a people. Black people don't really deal with the future. We can build a museum. We can have an anniversary month where we celebrate our rich historical legacy. But we don't do a good job with the future. We're afraid of the future. We don't have any plans for the future. There's no organizations, no dreams, plans, no discussion of the future. We're doing good to survive, to fight another day. Not much attention to the future. So I want to talk this morning about the future. My subject is entitled The Church of the Future. Our scripture is from the book of Genesis, chapter 19, verse 17. Flee for your lives. Don't stop and don't look back, or you will be swept away. You know the story. In our scripture, Abraham and his family left everything they knew and ventured out into the unknown, into the not yet, drawn by the future, following a vision of a promised land. God promised to make this insignificant, second-class, ragamuffin, oppressed, downtrodden people a great nation. And after going farther from their homes than they had ever been, traveling 100 miles across desolate desert wilderness, they came upon a place that looked kind of nice. It was different than what they were used to. It was an impressive place with palm trees and rich land and plentiful water and beautiful flowers. And they thought back on God's description of the promised land, a broad, rich land flowing with milk and honey. So they didn't know where they were going. They just had a description of where they were going. So they assumed this must be the place. But really, they had come to the twin cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. They were like so many people on their journey of life who come to a way station and think it's their destination. So they settled down expecting all their dreams to come true. But the longer they stayed, the more they realized that all that glitters ain't gold. The longer they stayed, they found out what looked so beautiful on the outside was wicked and corrupt on the inside. The longer they stayed, they found that it was corrupting their family, destroying their potential, causing terrible trauma to them, significant enough to abort their destiny. They could get messed up in this place, and all the plans that God had for them would be unattainable. And finally, the Bible says the Lord sent some angels to tell them, it's time to move on. You got to get out of here. Your journey is over. This place has become unlivable. Flee for your lives. Don't stop. Don't look back, or you'll be swept away. The Bible is the story of a people on an evolutionary journey. They're on a journey towards something in the future. An evolutionary journey of for God's intention for them. God has an intention for them, but it is in the future. In the Bible, God is trying to do something big. Can't be done at one time, in one place, in one act, or even by one generation. It's something big. And it requires that people go from stage to stage and level to level, from generation to generation. And the Bible is the story of an evolutionary journey of a wandering, nomadic, powerless people who follow a dream of a promised land through hardship, starvation, poverty, slavery, to realize their goal. And then when they obtain their goal of a promised land, the vision, the evolutionary journey doesn't stop. They go from getting a promised land, just having a place, to expanding their dream. And their dream becomes they want to be a great nation. They just don't want to be a nation. They want to be a great nation. Then when they become under David a great nation, their vision expands again. And they say, we want to become a light to all the nations. And eventually, under Jesus, is expanded another time to a kingdom of God on earth, where the whole world exists in harmony and compatibility with divine will. The Bible is the story of Israel's evolutionary journey. Truth be told, the whole universe is on an evolutionary journey. From the original Big Bang, in which the cosmic egg exploded and out of which creation came into being, the universe has been flying outwards. From the original explosion of concentrated energy, the universe has been flying outward. Scientists say the universe is still expanding because it's all one big explosion that's still going. It's moving outward. There were billions of years before atoms joined together to make up the elements that we know in chemistry that make up the periodic table. The elements that we look at in chemistry. It took billions of years for atoms to come together to create those elements. There were billions more before these elements joined together to make up the cosmic dust that we call matter. There were billions more before that cosmic dust formed into the planets and the stars. And there were billions more before there was life. And there were hundreds of millions more before there was intelligent life. The universe and everything in it is evolving. It's evolving. It's not staying the same. It's evolving. It's moving. The truth is, even on our human level, we're not only still evolving, but we're evolving 100 times faster than people were 10,000 years ago. People today are bigger, stronger, faster, and smarter than they've ever been. I was in Israel a couple of years ago, and we went to the fort of Masada, where the Roman soldiers killed the last revolutionaries in Israel. And I saw this sandal being displayed, and I thought it had to be a sandal of a child. And the tour guide said, no, that was the sandal of a Roman soldier. And he said a big Roman soldier was 5 feet tall. We're still evolving. Psychologists have discovered that our IQ goes up in every generation. Every generation is smarter than the one before. You can tell that by what your kids can do with a telephone. I pull out my telephone, I'm fumbling around with it, and my grandkids said, no, Granddaddy, it's like this. So I'm an educated man. What y'all? We're evolving. We're evolving. My grandchildren got a vocabulary I didn't have till I was 20. We're more resistant to disease. Our brains are changing so that we are becoming less aggressive, more cooperative, more collaborative. Even white folks are evolving. Chris Rock said these are the nicest white people America has ever produced. We are evolving. We've created tools and machines and techniques and processes that have magnified our abilities far beyond the imagination of just a generation before. You walk around with a smartphone in your pocket, you got more computing power that took people to the moon. And this process is going to continue. As we discover more about the mysteries of the universe, There'll be all kind of new breakthroughs that are beyond our present imagination. Just like at one time 100 years ago, people thought people would never fly. At one time, there's going to be things that we're going to see in just the next generation that are beyond our imagination. Electricity was always in the air, and nobody had an electric appliance. Microwaves have been here from the very beginning, and then nobody discovered any of it. Radio and TV waves, all that is here, but it's a matter of when you discover it. It's a whole lot of million things in the universe that are right here amongst us that we haven't discovered. There's talk of there being other dimensions. There's talk of travel, you not needing a vehicle to travel. There's talk of all kind of stuff, and it's a matter of us mastering the mysteries of the universe to be able to take advantage of them. Everything is evolving. The universe and everything in it is in a state of perpetual evolution. And the fact that this evolutionary dynamic exists through every aspect of the created universe is evidence that this evolutionary force reveals something about the nature and intention of God. The fact that it exists in everything, everywhere, all the time is evidence that this tells us something about the nature of God. God says in the Bible, I'm about to do a new thing. Truth is, God is always trying to do a new thing. Whether we can perceive it or cooperate with it, that's our problem. But it's going to be done anyway. And we either run and catch up or we get left behind. The religion of our African ancestors who established religion, they established universal laws to make religion simple enough, to codify just a few laws. And these laws told us everything we needed to know about how God works in the world and the nature of the universe. And one of these laws was called the perpetual transmutation of energy. This law is based on the understanding that we live in a universe where all is energy emanating from God. Physicists have confirmed this. All is energy. There is condensed energy, which has solid form. There's ethereal energy, which is like the air, but it's still energy. All of the forces of nature, gravity, magnetism, all the forces of nature, they're energy too. Everything is energy, from one end of the universe to the other, and it all emanates from God. Our ancestors were pretty smart. And this energy is always in motion. Higher frequencies are overcoming lower frequencies all the time. Hear what I'm saying? Higher frequencies replace lower frequencies all the time. That's the nature of the universe. It ain't personal. It's the nature of the universe. The new replaces the old. The strong replaces the weak. The better replaces the last. Nothing is standing still. Things are coming into being and going out of being all the time. Everything, including you and me, is either growing or dying, evolving or dissolving. This law is conveying that change is all there is. People who say, I like things the way they are advertising their ignorance of this important law. But more than that, they're actually fighting against the universe. They're fighting against God. Things never stay the same. We either growing or dying. Everything is always changing. This law is telling us, don't resist change. Resisting change is resisting growing. When you resist growing, you go backwards. When you resist growing, you prevent learning. When you prevent learning and fail to continually improve and grow, You are out of sync with the evolving universe. The law is telling us that we have to consciously use the energy from God that's flowing into our consciousness all the time. We have to put it to work to maintain compatibility with the evolving universe. We could go home now. But when we get stuck, when we become fixed, closed, arrogantly and stubbornly standing on some belief or position, despite all evidence to the contrary, we block our ability to cooperate with God's evolutionary dynamic. Arrested development, retardation. We're stuck. Contrary to what you've been taught, what's true today may not be true tomorrow. You can't pick up a Bible or a science book and say what's true in here is going to be true tomorrow. The universe is changing, so the nature of truth changes. Nobody has absolute truth forever. Ideas and philosophies have a shelf life. They have to be kept fresh and renewed or they'll spoil. And just like food left unattended, the same ideas and beliefs that once nourished you and helped you grow can poison you and make you sick. When we have bad beliefs and negative beliefs and outdated beliefs and fixed mindsets, these things make it difficult for us to conceive of things ever being different. So we become out of sync with the evolving universe. Our ability to cooperate with God's evolutionary intent is retarded, and that retardation is reflected in our everyday lived experience. You don't have bad luck. You're not cooperating with God's evolutionary intention. You're trying to put a round peg in a square hole. You're trying to put yesterday's reality and impose it on today. And it doesn't work, it doesn't fit, and it's going to lead to bad consequences. The greatest obstacle standing in the way of black people's evolutionary journey is the black church. I didn't stutter. I didn't stutter. I said exactly what I meant. The greatest obstacle standing in the way of black people's evolutionary journey is the black church. Our beloved founder said in the introduction to Black Christian Nationalism, New Directions for the Black Church, the existence of black people in America depends entirely upon whether it is possible to change black people's theology. The Christian indoctrination received by slaves on the plantation was developed as a means of control. It had nothing to do with saving your soul or enlightening your mind or any of that. It had to do with control. Slave revolts in Haiti, Jamaica, Cuba, Brazil, and all over the American South were constant problems, even though they go back and whitewash history and act like we're pretty docile and content in slavery. That's not the truth. A lot of what they claim were Indian wars were slave wars. A lot of the time the army was fighting slaves and didn't want to get out that they were fighting slaves. So they said they were fighting Indians. They needed a more effective way of controlling slaves. So they created slave catechisms, because up until this time, slaves were animals that didn't have souls. So we were not included in the religious life because we were animals that didn't have souls. Including us in religious life was not a sudden awareness of our humanity. It was strategic in order to create a more effective means of control. The slave catechisms prepared by the Christian missionary societies taught a Christianity that was designed to make slaves satisfied with their status as property and encouraged us to be conscientious servants to our masters. You don't have to listen to me, you can look it up. Slave catechisms, look them up. Google is your friend. Ain't no reason to walk around ignorant in 2016. Find out anything you want in 2 seconds. These catechisms taught that life is a vale of tears through which we must pass, and our reward lies on the other side of the grave when this life is over. And we were so thoroughly indoctrinated with this belief system, so thoroughly indoctrinated, that we got arrested development. We can't move, think, respond. And this same theological framework that guides the church to this day and causes many normally intelligent people to check their brains at the door every Sunday. They get outside the church, they're brilliant. What they do, whether they are an architect or a doctor or a lawyer, they're brilliant. But they come to church every Sunday and check their brains at the door and engage in 2 hours of foolishness. So most black people are stuck. They're stuck. They're stuck. And stubbornly refuse to change anything about what we believe. They have been taught that it's sinful to even think about what we believe, making it impossible to cooperate with God's evolutionary intention. A couple of years ago, Dr. Eddie Glaude Jr., the professor of religion and African American studies at Princeton University, created a gigantic uproar when he published an article entitled "The Black Church is Dead." Oh, Lord, it was a mess. Almost every black preacher in the country, they just lambasted Dr. Glaude. They acted like he was talking about their mama. Most of the preachers that were talking about the article, they didn't even read it. They were just reacting defensively to its title. Dr. Glaude wasn't so much saying that the black church had no value as much as he was pointing out that the central role that the church played in black community life had been abandoned. He was really saying the black church was not dead, but irrelevant. It's probably better to be dead than irrelevant. When you're dead, people do honor you and remember you and appreciate you. He was saying that the church had not evolved to be what we need in this day and time. He was saying that this is not the black church of generations past that had made it possible for us to survive outside of slavery. See, in a segregated society in which we had nothing else, the church was everything. The old black church was creative and inventive, allowing itself to be whatever we needed. That's right. It was our school. It was our bank. It was our insurance company. It was our social service network. It was our courtroom. It was our community center. It was everything. It was our police force. It was everything. The old black church produced whole communities where black people prospered, even in the midst of segregation and Jim Crow. Places like Rosewood, Florida, and Weeksville, New York, and Promised Land, South Carolina, and Mound Bayou, Mississippi, and Black Wall Street, Oklahoma. In Promised Land, South Carolina, the white folks were afraid of it. They had a saying. In the Klan, they had a saying. You can go in the Promised Land, but you won't come out. Anybody fleeing from anybody, anything, any kind of terror, lynching, all you had to do was reach promised land in Abbeville, South Carolina, and you were safe. And wasn't nobody coming in there to get you. You can come in, but you won't come out. Black Wall Street in Oklahoma was the richest community in all of Oklahoma. They had 19 millionaires when $1 million was worth $12 million in today's money. They had 19 black millionaires, and they had a community that had everything that everybody else has had and more than most. Businesses, homes, and it all was created from the church. The church is the foundation of all these communities. It was all spin off from the church. The old black church even produced all the leadership we had, from Nat Turner to Martin Luther King. Even with its bad theology, the old black church was the center of black community life. The black church of today is nothing like that. The black church has no practical value to black reality. None. Doesn't affect your life at all. Doesn't do anything. It's not advanced theologically. It preaches ingeniously entertaining sermons about nothing. It renders no service. It offers no leadership. Provides no answers. Stands for nothing except to make us go home when we're upset about something. It wastes a fantastic amount of money on foolishness. It allows hustlers and egomaniacs to create personality cults, celebrating themselves and their families as Negro royalty. Its dogmatic slavery, the doctrine, and dogged refusal to change has made it an irrelevant subculture of otherworldly focus and magical thinking that is divorced from the reality we live in. And it makes it incapable, makes black people incapable of serious thought or serious actions about our real world conditions. It disorganizes black people by causing many people to become so fed up with the foolishness in the church, they simply say, I don't believe in organized religion. I'm a spiritualist. I believe in God, but I don't believe in organized religion. That is disorganizing because you can't do nothing by yourself. In order to do the least little thing, you'd have to join with some other people. But when we get to the place where we walk away from the other people because they're in there with foolishness, it's disorganizing us. The only institution that we own and control is absolutely useless. As an instrument to help us secure an acceptable future, it is absolutely useless. In short, the black church has become black people's modern day Sodom and Gomorrah. And we stuck. We stuck. Over the past couple of years, the epidemic of high-profile killings of unarmed black people by police has become an American moral crisis and a flashpoint of social unrest. And in that period of enlightenment, we found out that it wasn't just Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Eric Harris, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, Sandra Bland, Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, Terrence Crutcher, and Keith Scott. But police shoot more than 900 unarmed black people every year and kill more than 300. And it's the only statistic that is not maintained by the FBI. It's the only homicide statistic. Even the director of the FBI said, I'm not quite sure how many black people are killed because it's not recorded anywhere. It took a British newspaper to start keeping count in order for them to come up with the numbers. 300 people a year killed, unarmed. That's 3 times the number of black people that were being lynched at the height of the lynching era. And children walking around traumatized, scared of the police, scared to go outside, don't know what to do. We don't know what to tell them. Whatever we tell them is wrong. We're all dancing on top of a volcano. But the church has no strategy for these things. No program, no organization, nothing. No answer. Other than to pray. Every day, black boys are being declared unteachable and channeled in the school-to-prison pipeline. Every day. As a matter of fact, the projection for constructing prison cells is based on each year's test scores. 4th grade test scores is how they determine how many people are not being educated. That's how many prison cells we're going to need in the future. You got over 200,000 prisoners released from prison every year. Every year, 200,000. The church has no program for reentry, for getting you back on your feet, for caring for you, for showing you your way, for providing, helping you mend with your family, put things back together. 200,000. And we have no program, no organization, no strategy to deal with this problem. Last year, the New York Times published an article entitled 1.5 million black men missing. You may have seen it. The article was explaining that the number of black men between the ages of 25 and 54 that are in jail or dead creates a severe gap between the genders. And today, for every 100 black women, there are only 83 black men. And in some communities like Detroit, this figure is as low as 60 men for every 100 women. 60 men for every 100 women. Another way to say it is 1 out of every 6 black men who are between 25 and 54, they have disappeared from daily life. The article said the disappearance of these men has far-reaching implications. Their absence disrupts family formation, leading to both lower marriage rates and higher rates of childbirth outside of marriage. The black women left behind find that potential partners of the same race are scarce, while men who face an abundant supply of potential mates don't need to compete as hard to find one. As a result, men seem less likely to commit to romantic relationships or to work hard to maintain them. This imbalance has forced women to rely on themselves, often alone, to support a household. There are more missing African American men nationwide than there are African American men in all of New York City, or more than Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Detroit, Houston, Washington, and Boston combined. You take the black population of all those cities, black male population of all those cities, and that's the number of black men missing from daily life in the black community. And the church has no problem, has no program, has no strategy, has no organization to deal with that either. 75% of the black church is black women, and 3% of the leadership is black women. And the church has no program to deal with that either. And while you're sitting around with your jaws tight, understand that you allow this to happen. You give the church money and support it, and support pastors and preachers, and you allow this to happen and put no pressure on them clowns to do something for their own people. I didn't create the problem, I'm just telling you about it. These things beg for some kind of serious and intelligent response. But the black church prevents serious and intelligent thinking by continuing to preach otherworldly solutions and promoting magical expectations. Jesus is going to buy me a BMW. Jesus is not going to fix these things. If that's the program, every time you're on the radio, you hear somebody talking about terrible stuff, they say, well, I just put my faith in the Lord and I pray. Well, I'm here to tell you Jesus ain't going to fix it. If Jesus was going to fix these problems, he had ample opportunity up to now to get something done. Jesus needs to be fired from this line of business. However ridiculous it may seem, the vast majority of black people remain stuck in the same place, defiantly refusing to move despite the overwhelming evidence that it's time to move on. Reminds me of a story of some people in a farming community that were facing the threat of a major flood. Relentless rain came to this community, and they lasted for such a long period of time that the river rose dangerously high. The people formed sandbag brigades to protect the things that they valued. The whole town, men, women, and children, worked to exhaustion to get the sandbags ready. The sandbags were stacked high on top of each other, but the flood waters rose much faster. Soon water covered their fields, drowning their crops. There being nothing they could do, the people retreated to their homes to seek safety while they watched with a sense of helplessness as their livelihoods were destroyed before their eyes. They wanted to flee, but their roots were too deeply planted. They were so totally invested in their land, their values, their memories, their way of life, and the way they felt about their farms and town and friends that they couldn't leave. They had relatives buried there. Still, the river kept on rising. It now covered the first floor of their homes. They watched in horror as family photographs, symbols of their past, curled up and floated away on the water. Then they saw furniture that had been in their family for generations be lifted up off the floor and float away. They felt they were losing the very meaning of their lives. And soon the flood waters covering the town began to seep into the ground, contaminating the groundwater they needed to drink, poisoning the very environment that they lived in. Their homes, their environment was becoming unlivable. If they stayed in this place, they would surely die. Despite all of this, something in their minds continued to urge them to remain where they were. Rationally, they knew they had to leave, but emotionally, they were immobilized. They were stuck. Like that flooded town, the traditional black church has become an unlivable place. Just like Sodom and Gomorrah, it's time to move on, or we're going to abort our evolutionary journey as individuals and as a people. It's not easy to get people to leave the place they know, even when that place has become unlivable. And you know that based on some areas in Detroit. The traditional black church has become an unlivable place. And it's a fact we need to face and we need to talk about more often. The Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church is dedicated to breaking free of this church of the past, to become the black church of the future. See, our church didn't emerge out of slavery. We didn't start on the plantation. Our church never was a means of control to keep slaves in order. Our church emerged out of a uniquely hopeful time in the black experience, a period of rising expectations. When the 1954 Supreme Court decision struck down segregation, the civil rights struggle created fresh hope of full citizenship. And the Black Power era made Black unity, pride, and self-determination believable possibilities. It was believable. Our church rode this wave of consciousness as it grew. We built churches across the country during this narrow period of 10 to 12 years where Black people were suddenly awake. This narrow period, we moved across the country and we rode this wave of consciousness until it subsided. And when it subsided, we had to dig in for raw survival, to hold on to what we had built, to maintain it. And that struggle to maintain it has made us tired. We've gotten old trying to maintain what we got, to not lose what we got. We ain't trying to expand it, we're trying to maintain it. But we stand on the precipice of a new era of rising Black consciousness. And that's why I'm having this discussion with you this morning. We stand at the beginning of a new era of Black consciousness. A marvelous new militancy is growing and touching the hearts and minds of Black people everywhere. But in order to capture the imagination of a new generation, to inspire hope in the future and to harness the hot wind of the revolutionary Holy Spirit born anew, we have to present a new generation with a new church. For 63 years, we've been on an evolutionary journey, a journey to develop a church of the future. Hear what I say. A church of the future. A church that can offer concrete solutions to the problems we face as a people. A church that affirms our value as Black people. A church that develops our human potential and allows for its full expression. A church that teaches that God is in us and all around us and works through us to improve our lives and shape our future. A church that teaches that as expressions of God, we are not helpless, dependent children, but co-creating partners endowed with an inner divinity. Partners with God. We can do anything. We can change anything. We can build anything. We can overcome anything. And we can become anything that we imagine. You have an imagination, that's a God faculty. Animals don't have imagination. That's why they live 1,000,000 years the same way today as they did 1,000,000 years ago. They don't have imagination. Imagination is a God faculty. We are like God, but to a lesser degree, which means that anything that we imagine, we actually have the ability to do. God imagined the universe. He imagined you. He imagined all of the planets and the way things work together. That is a God faculty. And we have been endowed with it. When they say we're created in the image and likeness of God, they're not saying we look like God. We have the same attributes and characteristics, but to a lesser degree. And when you imagine you're going to get out of school, and when you imagine you're going to get a house, or when you imagine you're going to change something or build something, that's the God in you, and then you got to work to make it come true. We need a church that teaches us who we are, not who we're not. As the church of the future, we reject the old-time earth is flat Christian theology that declares us to be worthless, undeserving, unworthy, filthy rags, conceived in sin, possessing a corrupt human nature, damaged by original sin, and irredeemable except through the blood sacrifice of Jesus. We reject the belief that the one life we get is destined to be a veil of tears through which we must pass and happiness comes on the other side. We reject the belief that the world is hopelessly fallen and there's nothing we can do to make it a better place. We reject the Black Christian belief that suffering is redemptive, that the greater the suffering, the greater the reward. The greater the suffering, the greater the suffering. We reject the man-made rules that are passed off as dictates from God to exclude people, oppress people, control people, and maintain the status quo. We reject the telling of spiritual fairy tales to adults as objective truth. We reject the old-time church's refusal to think about the things we're dealing with from day to day, to use the creative intelligence that God makes available to us to re-examine our beliefs in light of the vast and growing storehouse of human knowledge. As the church of the future, we reject the primitive conception of God as a super parent in the sky, a big white man with a big white beard sitting on a big white cloud. We reject it. We reject the notion that this big man is up there throwing lightning bolts at the evil and passing out blessings to the good. That's not the way that God works. As the church of the future, we believe God is not a super being or even a supreme being. God is the source of all being, the source from whence everything emerges, the source of life, the source of power, the source of consciousness, the source of love, the source of everything. We believe that if God is the source of all being, then we are unique expressions of God. The worst ones of us are unique expressions of God, unique particularizations of the divine. Each one of us. We believe that our divine purpose is simply to be. That ain't a hard assignment, is it? Our divine purpose is to be. God is the source of all being. Our job is to be. Is to be what we can become. What the best we can ultimately be. To become ourselves as fully, as completely, as powerfully, and as authentically as we can. Our purpose is to become the dreams and visions that have been etched into our beings. We are called to strive every day to be our best and highest and truest selves for as long as we live. We're called to be the best version of ourselves we are capable of attaining each day. We're not called to be somebody else. We're not called to mimic somebody else. We're not called to live up to somebody else's standards. We're called to be authentically and fully who we are. And nobody can be you better than you. The only person we are in competition with is the person that we were yesterday. This is a never-ending evolutionary journey. It is a journey toward a destination we will never reach, because whatever we become, we still possess the dynamic potential to be more of what we already are. This process of pursuing our highest, best, and truest selves is religion. It is worship. It is revolution. It is salvation. When you realize the divinity within you, there is nothing more religious than that. When you render that divinity in service to other people, there is nothing more religious than that. This is the process by which we cooperate with God's evolutionary intention and toward the realization of divine will in the world. So I dropped by to tell you it's time to move on. It's time to move on. All this, maybe we ought to be like so-and-so's church and do something. So. No, that ain't who we are. That ain't who we are. We got enough trouble explaining that to people that don't know us. We shouldn't have to explain it to people who are already in here. That's not who we are. We are on the precipice of a new era of black consciousness. And if we want to facilitate this move of God through a new generation, we must break with the black church of the past and boldly present ourselves as the black church of the future. The black church of the future will exist to provide inspiration, guidance, and fellowship on our evolutionary journey toward full humanity and a place of power and dignity in the world. To be a part of the black church of the future is to be a seeker in the honest quest to fulfill our highest potential and realize our greatest dreams individually and collectively. The black church of the future will cease to be a behavior controlling institution and will become an institution dedicated to the empowerment and the expansion of life. In the black church of the future, worship will become the celebration of the power of God who is in us and all around us and who we are asking to act through us. In the black church of the future, Christian education will become the search for truth rather than the indoctrination of the faithful with a particular form of religious propaganda. In the church of the future, sin becomes any act that diminishes the being of another. The negation of being is the negation of the God that's within them. Black is beautiful because it enhances being. Racism is evil because it diminishes being. Black Lives Matter is right because it protects being, and calls for law and order are wrong because they suppress being. The church of the future stands for right because it is right, and it fights against wrong because it is wrong. In the church of the future, social action becomes creating a society in which the sacredness of God, of the God within each one of us, is respected and protected. In the church of the future, Christianity becomes something not to be believed, but something to be lived courageously, fully, audaciously, authentically. In the church of the future, we are not so much concerned with the Jesus on the cross as we are Jesus, our example, guide, and doorway into the future. In the church of the future, we are not children seeking favor from a supernatural parent, but co-creators cooperating with God to shape our lives and to shape our world. In the church of the future, we have outgrown the Jesus gonna fix it and Lord do it for me. We say we gonna fix it and Lord do it through me. In the church of the future, we reject manipulation by guilt. Guilt has no place, it has no purpose. Reject the belief that our lives are defined by past sins, past failures, past mistakes, past losses, past heartbreaks, past disappointments. In an evolutionary journey, everything we experience has a purpose. In an evolutionary journey, experience is the process by which we learn what we need to learn to move to the next level. So we don't do guilt and looking back and confessing our sins. In the church of the future, we understand that we are part of an ongoing process that spans time, spans lives, and spans generations. And as long as we get up every day and contribute some positive good wherever we are, we're doing our part to advance that journey. What black people have gone through in this country has been terrible. It's been horrible, but it hasn't been without meaning. Our suffering has not been in vain. In each generation, we have been evolving. We've been getting stronger and better and higher and smarter. And what hasn't killed us has made us stronger. Our labor is not in vain. In the church of the future, we are guided by the faith that we are being prepared for some great purpose, some great destiny, some great mission, some great role. And when we work our way out of this mess, when we climb up out of this hole, when we come back from everything that we've gone through, there ain't gonna be nobody that's gonna be able to deal with us. It's time to move on. It's time to complete the work we started 63 years ago. It's time to be the church of the future. Amen.